Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are in a race to win the Battleground states.
Hillary Clinton losing her lead in 5 key states, according to one
polls have him losing ground in states that will be key to victory.
As much as I would love to put the first woman president in office, I don't trust her.
You know, they keep trying to come after Pennsylvania. You know, we'll go door to door up until election day to make sure that, you know, a dangerous candidate like Trump doesn't win.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
God bless the United States of America.
I'm Nick Zaccanini. I've lived in Philly for about 15 years now. I went to college in Pittsburgh, and then I moved to Philadelphia after college and started working for a tech firm, and have lived here ever since. Ryan and I met about 10 years ago. His cousin is one of my best friends, and you know, as relationships do, it kind of just grew from there. I think what's unique about this election is that, you know, we still had a really strong ground force from the Obama campaign. You know, we'll go door to door up until election day to make sure that, you know, a dangerous candidate like Trump doesn't win.
You know, I think there's a lot of people out there that aren't voting for Trump and saying it. I mean, I just went by somebody in the city that was polling the other day. She said, surprisingly, yeah, there's people voting for Trump, which, you know, I find great. I mean, Philadelphia is particularly Democrat.
No, I know,
all the
it's
way.
crazy. People actually, a lot of Trump supporters, like, are convinced he's going to win, which I don't know, is a little strange to me.
Like, even driving down the street now and elsewhere, I don't see a lot of Hillary signs out there. I think people are kind of afraid to tell their neighbors, even though they both are going to end up voting for Trump. I find it.
Philadelphia is a pretty blue city, though. I mean,
it is. I agree.
When's the last time a Republican won in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely with you there. My friend Sheila, who's doing that door knocking and campaigning and polling out in the suburbs, is gonna meet us here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Let me call her and see where she is.
Hello.
Hey, Sheila, it's Ryan. I'm in the car here with Nick.
Hey, Ryan.
How are you?
How are you?
Quite all right. We're right around the corner from the shooting range. We're gonna meet you there. I'm Ryan Fisher. I grew up in Florida. I moved to Philadelphia in 2001. I went to school at Villanova University. I'm gonna do everything I can to help the Trump campaign. If that means going and knocking on some doors with Sheila, I welcome that idea. I think that it's a great thing. I mean, I would love to show Nick that Pennsylvania could actually go Republican. He says, no way, not gonna happen. It hasn't happened in a very long time. I don't know if it has happened very far back. I may not have even been alive.
I mean, Trump, how many times has he switched parties in New York alone? He's such a manipulative guy. He talks about who he's going to appoint to the Supreme Court, but how do you even really know he's going to do what he says he's going to do?
Well, I think he put a good list out there of people, and I think he's going to follow through on his word.
Guy.
Well, I mean, Hillary honest? I mean, the politicians, it's like every 4 years they come around. Who are they really going to follow through with? All of them seem to lie to us.
So yeah, man, I know you think that you're going to actually get some work done on the ground here, but I just don't see how that's possible.
Whoever wins Pennsylvania is probably going to win the election. I know there's other ways around it, but
And you really think Trump has a chance of winning PA?
I do. I think there's people out there that aren't saying it.
All right. Let's shoot some guns, man.
I was born outside of Chicago, Illinois, and moved to Pennsylvania in the mid to late 80s. Been in Pennsylvania ever since. I think Pennsylvania is a great state. Philadelphia is the birthplace of our country. It's where the Declaration of Independence was signed and where the Liberty Bell is, so there's a lot of history in this area.
Nick, Ryan, and Sheila represent the changing electorate in Pennsylvania, a key swing state in U.S. national politics. Philadelphia is a well-recognized symbol of American freedom and a longtime Democratic stronghold. Pennsylvania has voted Democratic in every presidential election since 1992. Unlike Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, and Michigan, the state had not been considered up for grabs. But Pennsylvania's 20 electoral votes could help determine the surprise outcome in 2016.
I mean, I could definitely understand having a handgun for personal protection. You know, as much as conservatives think we're not okay with that, that's really not the case.
You guys want to take a shot?
Well, but that's my fear, is that I feel like Hillary is going to try to take away our Second Amendment rights.
She's not going
to. I want to get my application in, and I want to get my background check done before the election. I don't trust her.
All right, so that comes
law.
back to the idea that should assault rifles, automatic machine guns with large magazines be sold to anyone? Because that's what we're really, that's what liberals are, you know, Hillary, Democrats are against, are guns like that, not handguns.
And if you have a background check and you've gotten the clearances, there's no reason that you
What about all
shouldn't have a gun.
the innocent people that die because of gun accidents, or, you know, again, people that shouldn't be having guns in the first place, you know, maybe with mental health issues?
Gun control, immigration, trades, jobs, and healthcare are among the chief issues driving voter turnout in 2016. But by international standards, U.S. voter turnout is exceedingly low, and among the lowest in the developed world. Low voter turnout is typically attributed to political disengagement. In the 2012 presidential election, 57.5% of eligible Americans voted. The president is ultimately decided by the Electoral College, which is made up of 538 electors and dates back to the country's founding fathers. Most states have a winner-take-all system that awards all of its electors to the winning presidential candidate.
Election started with the founding of the Republic, and George Washington was the first president. He served for 2 terms, 2 4-year terms, and since then it's been a tradition.
The U.S. system is not a parliamentary system, it's a presidential system, and so in this election, the American voters are looking to elect the president. They're also going to re-elect the Congress. So the outcome of this election is determined by something called the Electoral College.
The way the system works is that voters do not vote for candidates, they vote for electors in each state. And the electors officially determine who will be the next president. And this is done at the so-called Electoral College. And in the Electoral College, almost all states cast their votes using what we call unit rule. They cast their votes for the plurality winner, the person who wins the most votes in each state. And one aggregates these votes across all states, and that determines which candidate wins.
In other words, a state like New York or California has a lot more Electoral College votes than does a small state like North or South Dakota But what's interesting about the Electoral College is that you don't have to win the state by a lot, you just have to win it, to win in the Electoral College. So sometimes, very rarely, that can create a situation where the popular vote isn't the same as the ultimate outcome of the Electoral College vote. But that is very, very rare. We think it might have happened in 2000 when Al Gore was running against George Bush. And it was determined that Bush won in the Electoral College, but it looks as if Gore won in the popular vote.
Interesting enough, this situation would repeat itself again in the 2016 presidential election. The outdated Electoral College system, the high cost of running for higher office, and the voter ID laws passed in many states has caused some experts to call for widespread reforms in the elections process. This would include limiting private funding for political campaigns in the wake of the Supreme Court case of Citizens United in 2010, and potentially putting an end to the Electoral College and the nation's two-party system. But the Democratic and Republican parties dominate the country's national political landscape, making it very difficult for any reform and for third-party candidates to make inroads among the nation's electorate.
We've had two parties for the entire history of the Republic. The parties have changed over time. Now, of course, it's the Republicans and Democrats, and they usually are center-right for the Republicans and center-left for the Democrats.
So is there a chance that we could have a viable third party in the United States? Not the way the system is currently configured. So thinking about the House in the US Congress, the fact that we are voting for one person, it makes it very, very difficult for somebody to break in.
So one wonders whether there might be a better system for choosing a president. One could get rid of the Electoral College, and I think that would mean there would be no discrepancy between the electoral vote winner and the popular vote winner. The candidate with the most popular votes would win, and I support that kind of reform. But we also, I think, need a reform of the election system, particularly in primaries.
For decades, polls have shown that large majorities of Americans would prefer a popular vote system instead of the Electoral College. Many political observers, including academics and party leaders on both sides of the aisle, have called for an end to the Electoral College. But this is easier said than done, since the U.S. would have to pass a constitutional amendment passed by 2/3 of the House and Senate and approved by 38 states, or convene a constitutional convention, which has never been done, but would have to be called for by 34 states.
I think the current political system is in need of reform. People are frustrated with the two-party system. They're frustrated with the hierarchy that they perceive in those parties, and they believe that those parties are ran by elites who are not connected to their lives.
The economic recession and slow recovery, partisan gridlock in the Republican-led Congress, and widespread distrust in the media has only exacerbated existing fault lines. But the 2016 primary elections were especially unique. The Republican field began with a record number of 17 primary candidates. The eventual winner, Donald Trump, a billionaire reality TV star who has never held elected office.
Donald Trump, just last week, he confirmed to the National Review that he is again considering a run in 2016.
This is the beginning of the end for Trump.
The beginning of the end.
Beginning of the end?
This is probably starting of the beginning of the end for Donald Trump.
Here's what I know. Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud. His promises are as worthless as a degree from Trump University.
Don't worry about it, little Marco, I will.
All right, well, let's hear it, Big Don. Donald.
Don't worry about it,
Don't
worry about it, little Marco.
Gentlemen.
Flying Ted, you know, I came up with the idea, but you have to spell it right. It's Lyin apostrophe, Lion Ted.
Poor guy, you gotta see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. I go, oh, maybe that's what I said.
This is a tough business to run for president.
I know, you're a tough guy, Jeff.
And we need to have a leader that is real tough. You're never going to be president of the United States by insulting your way to the presidency.
Let's see, I'm at 42 and you're at 3, so far I'm doing better.
Doesn't matter.
So far I'm doing better.
Donald Trump, the billionaire real estate magnate, will win the Republican presidential primary.
Beautiful. What a beautiful.
During a brutal primary campaign, Donald Trump swiftly rose to become the nominee. This was despite concerns over his lack of experience and opposition from key players within the GOP. His popularity shook the Republican Party to its core. The Democratic contest, on the other hand, quickly became a two-person race between former First Lady and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Clinton's campaign was hobbled by FBI investigations into her private email server, the hacking of the Democratic National Committee emails, allegedly by Russia, and questions over her health raised by conservative media. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders energized the Democratic Party's liberal wing, winning over millions of young people and working-class voters with his message of income equality, free college tuition, and minimum wage increases. But with the support of mainstream Democrats, party establishment, and superdelegates, Hillary won the Democratic primary. She would go on to be the first female presidential nominee in U.S. history. With the two unpopular candidates entering the general election, the ground game in swing states became critical. Sheila and Nick continued their get-out-to-vote volunteer efforts while campaigning for their candidates.
I was wondering if you'd be willing to answer a couple quick questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Do you believe the next president should continue Barack Obama's policies or change direction?
Oh, change direction.
I can't. As much as I would love to put the first woman president in office, I don't trust her. I'm scared. I think she's very corrupt, and I do not think our national security will be, I think our national security will be at serious risk.
So, I mean, and as a former Bernie supporter, it is tough sometimes to go full board with Hillary, especially with some of the controversies, Benghazi, the emails. She does seem to be not as transparent as one would like in a political candidate, in a potential president. Hello. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Is your name Shirley?
Yes.
Shirley, are you registered to vote for November 8th? Yeah? You sound excited.
I am.
Do you know where your polling place is, and
yes.
do you have transportation to get there?
It's right.
Oh, it's right. Okay, all right, cool. Okay. Well, so do you have any questions or anything about the candidate that you might support on November 8th?
Do I have questions?
Yeah.
No.
No? You're all set to go? Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for your time, and maybe I'll see you around the neighborhood.
Okay.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Take care. I think to a certain extent, in politics, some of that's necessary. I mean, Hillary, in her 30 years, I'm sure has seen that you can't always be 100% truthful. However, the alternatives are a candidate like Donald Trump, who will say something on camera and then 5 minutes later insist that he didn't say it. And it's interesting to me that his supporters will talk about how Hillary's crooked, how Hillary's a liar, and yet they can't see that their candidate is literally lying on video to their faces, and is seriously a con man.
Donald Trump is the product of three major influences: his parents and a lawyer in New York named Roy Cohn, who was the infamous attorney who represented Senator Joseph McCarthy during the red baiting hearings of the 1950s. Donald Trump got from his father both a kind of cold, distant upbringing, but also a deep belief in the idea that work is at the heart of everything you do. From his mother, he got this sense of performance, showmanship, and that's really at the core of who Donald Trump is. And then from Roy Cohn, he got this much tougher kind of approach that Donald Trump faulted his father for not having. That's the idea that when you're hit, you hit back 10 or 100 times harder, and when you're looking for publicity, all publicity is good publicity. It doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative.
I think that it took the media way too long to take him seriously. And I include myself among these people. I think most people in the media, when they saw him descending this escalator to announce his candidacy for president, we took it as a joke.
Donald Trump has always thought about becoming president, always thought about going into politics. This goes back more than 30 years. This is no sudden decision on his part. There's nothing impulsive about it. He's been thinking about it since the 1980s. He also has an enormously deep belief in himself as someone who can change things, who can get things done. Going back decades when he was able to repair the New York City ice skating rink that the city government had been completely unable to do, he came in and he said to the mayor, I'll take care of this in just a few weeks with just a little bit of money, no problem. And he did it. He came in ahead of budget, under budget, and ahead of time.
So did Donald Trump take advantage of what was already there in the Republican Party? Racial negativity, some sense of what I would call a cultural threat, that the previous supremacy of white people, and particularly white men, is being challenged in American society as there are growing numbers of minority people in the country. And so what Trump did, I think, is listen very carefully to the kinds of speech that was going on in talk radio, picked up on these themes, the kind of things that got people worked up on the right, being angry about immigration, talking about growing number of immigrants, delegitimizing Obama, questioning his birth in the United States. These were themes that were there. Trump seemed to do a particularly effective job at picking up both the emotional tone of that and the content.
The GOP caused Donald Trump because the GOP has been playing with fire with dog whistle politics for decades. Sometimes the Democrats did that too, but they have since shifted as they realize that their electorate is way more diverse than dog whistle politics will allow. But by race baiting, by assuming that the legitimacy of the President of the United States was not there, all of these kinds of plays to racial fears and xenophobia created the environment in which a demagogue like Donald Trump could succeed.
The 2016 election was unusually long and bruising, lasting more than 18 months. An intense media frenzy probed every detail of each campaign, resulting in sometimes uneven coverage of the major party candidates. While the media circus and campaigns continued, what was notably missing was a real discourse on the substantive issues facing the American people. One of the few candidates to recognize this lack of discourse was Bernie Sanders.
I think Bernie Sanders was a good example of an insurgent candidate. Like Trump on the right, he was on the left and represented Democratic voters, particularly young Democratic voters or independent voters, who felt disaffected and were angry with the more traditionalist policies of the Democratic Party. That caused a problem for the Democrats in finding a consensus choice. Of course, Hillary Clinton in the end won in the primaries and caucuses, so we got the more traditional candidate. But in a sense, he had a big influence because she's adopted some of his views, some of his more left-oriented views.
I think that a lot of people make the mistake to assume that Bernie Sanders really resonated with the millennial generation because he wanted to give them free things. He wanted to give them free college, he wanted to give them free health care. And maybe that's true in some broad sense, but I think that millennials really just appreciated that Bernie Sanders didn't talk down to them as if their concerns weren't important, as if their concerns weren't valid. And the other candidates don't seem to do that. Donald Trump, in several circumstances, has essentially called millennials out for being needy, for being whiny. And Hillary Clinton has this line that she likes to use where she says, you know, if millennials don't like me, it's because they weren't alive, they weren't old enough to know what I've done. And I think that that's patronizing. I think that millennials feel called out, they feel talked down to, when in reality, we're a huge part of this economy. We're a huge part of the voting bloc that people need to appeal to.
One problem that Bernie Sanders faced is that he wasn't really seen as a Democrat. He was an independent senator from the state of Vermont. He was not considered to be a central player within the Democratic Party. And so why was Bernie so successful? I think he actually tapped into a vein of discontent among young people who are still mad at the outcome of the 2008 recession. There's still, maybe it's growing on the Occupy Wall Street movement, but there was a lot of anger at the banks. There was a sense, and Bernie did this very successfully, he paired Clinton with Goldman Sachs, and some of the big banks pointed out that she'd taken these large speaking fees from the banks. And I think for a lot of younger Democrats who didn't know that much about her past, the kinds of issues that she'd worked on, he was sort of defining her for them. So I think that young people in this country are very worried about their futures. They're carrying, college-educated kids carrying a lot of debt. The job market doesn't look fantastic. And he tapped into a way of thinking about that she was not successful at.
When people look at our political system, they think there's a new theory. They think that a new theory is necessary because they don't see Congress functioning. We've experienced government shutdowns. We have high levels of student loan debt. We can't find jobs that give us a living wage. And so people don't think politics is working. So Senator Sanders was saying, we need essentially a revolution, and you can critique whether or not that was the right phrasing he should have used, but essentially a new way for politics to work.
Bernie Sanders, his relationship with the Democratic Party was quite fractious, and the Democratic Party had believed from the beginning that this was Hillary Clinton's year. They sort of resented Sanders for coming along and posing a challenge to their chosen leader.
Many Bernie Sanders supporters were resistant to the idea of voting for Clinton or Trump. This led to the rise of the third-party candidates, like Jill Stein of the Green Party and Gary Johnson of the Libertarian Party, raising concerns amongst both the Hillary and Trump camps.
A lot of Bernie Sanders supporters from the beginning were deeply resistant to the idea of ever voting for or supporting Hillary Clinton. They saw her as every bit as much of the corrupt insider Washington system that Sanders was running against as anyone else in the party. And so the idea that they would flip from Sanders to Clinton has been a hard sell for the Clinton campaign from the beginning.
With only weeks left to the election, both candidates were hit by more controversy. Donald Trump's comments on an 11-year-old videotape and alleged sexual assaults by multiple women received national attention.
Donald Trump's motive was he always wanted, obviously, the attention. He's an enormously egotistical person, and he craves attention. He craves the love of the public. The way he described it to me, he said, you know, people think I have all of these ideas about issues or principles. He said, that's not the way I operate. I look at the camera and I see the red light that says I'm live on cable TV. And I know that if I say something that's provocative, that's completely off the wall, that red light will stay on. He says, I'll do anything it takes to keep that red light on.
So in thinking about some of his statements about the Mexican judge who was considering a case against Trump University, that's the issue here. So Trump is directly involved. And Trump discredits him by saying, even though he's born in the United States, oh, he's Mexican. And so therefore, he's not going to give me a fair hearing. This is insulting. It sounds pretty un-American. And he was denounced for that. He also attacked the Gold Star family at the Democratic Convention. And that also received quite a backlash from people who also said that's very un-American.
I think the greatest danger for the Trump presidency is that he would lose interest almost immediately. You know, I asked Donald Trump at one point, it's getting close to the election, you might actually be president. Have you thought about how you would actually operate day to day as president? And I said, have you been reading any of the biographies of great presidents to learn how to do it? He said, no, I've always thought about reading a biography, but I've never done it. And I said, well, how are you going to make decisions day to day? What presidents do is they take in enormous amounts of information, they synthesize it, and they make a decision. How will you do that? And he said, I'm not going to read any effing reports. And he spelled out the word. He said, people can come in, they can talk to me for 20 seconds, and I'll know what to do. And I said, but presidents deal with very complex things all around the world, new issues. How are you going to learn about them in 20 seconds? He said, I know it in my gut. I'll make a decision by instinct. And that's how he's always operated, and that's what he believes would work for him as president.
TV news, and to a lesser extent print media, is going to have a lot of reckoning to do when this election comes to a close. I think especially cable news has always, or at least in modern history, treated presidential elections as if they are reality television shows. The difference here being that most candidates aren't really prepared to behave as if it is a reality TV show, and this year we have a candidate that whose fame was born on reality television. He knows how to play this game, and he's been playing the media like a fiddle for this entire season, and we have been allowing him to do that. We have been allowing him to absorb the news cycle with ridiculous rants, with ridiculous tweets. We have been giving time to things that are objectively not important news. And so in 2020, when we do this all again, I think that the media is going to have a lot of lessons to learn from this election.
Despite across-the-board condemnation from both Democrats and Republicans, Trump stayed in the race and fought back from declining poll numbers. And days before the election, the FBI made an unprecedented move. It would revive its investigation into Clinton's private email server. This was based on newly found emails from former Congressman Anthony Weiner, the disgraced husband of Clinton aide Huma Abedin. Further, the alleged hacking of John Podesta's email, Clinton's campaign chairman, by Russia, and its daily release by WikiLeaks damaged the Clinton campaign and overshadowed Trump's scandals.
You have 11 days to go. What would you say to a voter who right now will be seeing you and hearing what you're saying, I didn't trust her before, I don't trust her anymore right now, and they're heading to the ballot box tomorrow?
You know, I think people a long time ago made up their minds about the emails. I think that's factored into what people think, and now they're choosing a president. So I would urge everybody to get out and vote early in all the states that have early voting, because I think Americans want a president who can lead our country, who can get the economy working for everyone, not just those at the top, and who can bring our country.
Despite concerns from both Democrats and Republicans alike, polls suggested a Clinton win. The day before the election, the New York Times predicted Clinton would win with an 85% likelihood. Nate Silver's polling website, 538, predicted Clinton would win with a 71% probability. American
foreign intelligence is pretty confident that Russia is behind the high-level hacking that is happening and the leaks to WikiLeaks that are happening, and I think that it is telling that they are only happening to Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party and not Donald Trump and the Republican Party. His campaign and the Republican Party have been really ready to embrace WikiLeaks when only several years ago they were calling for the destruction of Edward Snowden, of Chelsea Manning. We have taken a party who has previously been militantly against leaking classified information, and now all of a sudden, because it works in their interest, they are okay with leaks, and they are saying that WikiLeaks is doing the job that the mainstream media isn't doing.
A nightmare scenario was described by many Democrats and progressives throughout the campaign season, that a Republican majority government could potentially change the direction of the country for the worst and test the resilience or weaknesses of the American democratic institutions for years to come.
I don't make predictions. I look at the polls and ask what do the polls tell me the day or the weekend before the election. And the polls are now saying it's almost surely going to be a landslide in Clinton's favor. So if I had to make a prediction, I'd rely on the polls. If Trump is elected president, then I think all bets are off because in a sense he's his own man and uncontrollable. So I think there could be big problems for the country if he's elected president.
I think Clinton's gonna win this one. I think she'll probably win it soundly. Maybe not a landslide, but I think that there will certainly be a mandate after this. I'm not sure that a Trump presidency, it would certainly be an interesting time for the United States. We would certainly shift our standing, I think, in the international economy, and so as long as we don't have all three, as long as we don't have Trump and a Republican Senate and a Republican Congress, then I think that we'll be protected from a lot of the big shifts that would occur should he become president. And I think that that's the big difference between America and a lot of other countries, is that the executive really doesn't have in practice as much power as we think that he does.
Aside from Donald Trump's lack of knowledge and lack of curiosity about the government, the other great danger about him is that he has always operated with a tiny circle of people around him. His business, as big as he likes to portray it, has always been a handful of people who've worked for him for decades, who trust him and are trusted in return. Everyone outside that tiny circle is what he calls roadkill. They're people that he just fires at will. They're people he doesn't want to spend time with. He's led a very isolated, solitary life, and he really is secluded from most of what politicians have to deal with most of the time. So for Donald Trump to be president and have this tight circle of people and no one else around him who he trusts, that is not the way the government runs. That is not the way presidents are able to get their programs through. So we do face the prospect of having a deeply isolated president who doesn't have the network of connections and the ability to get his work done that we would expect of a president. Hillary Clinton has all of this kind of structural advantages to win this race. And Donald Trump, conversely, has done virtually everything you could imagine to lose this race. But that said, Hillary Clinton's ability to lose to very unusual characters is historic. I mean, this is someone who lost to the inexperienced senator who has a Muslim name and who has never held high office before. Then she nearly lost to the radical Jewish socialist from Vermont. So she has an ability to lose to people that is unmatched in modern American political history. So I wouldn't put it past her to pull that off one more time. But everything, all the indicators structurally point to a Clinton win. That doesn't necessarily mean that the American people will be happy about it.
It's really hard for me to imagine a world where Donald Trump wins. One, because of the numbers, but two, because it gives me some anxiety. But it's also hard for me to imagine a world where Donald Trump wins because he does not have plans for what he would do to solve a lot of our major problems. He has talking points, but he doesn't actually have concrete policies with sound fiscal analysis behind any of his rhetoric. So when it comes to him being in office, it could be pretty much anything. He could be influenced by pretty much everyone, and probably more than anything else, the sentiment of his most vocal supporters, who are not the most sound people when it comes to actually creating, logical policies for this country.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Decision Night in America here at NBC's Democracy Plaza. It is 7 p.m. in the East. The polls have just closed in 6 states, and we have our first...
I'm so nervous for this election.
I'm pretty confident. Let's see how it goes. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, the media has just like totally latched on to all these, all this minutia, and not that they're not relevant about the candidates, but I don't see a lot of real issues being talked about.
State of Virginia, it looks like Hillary Clinton has pulled ahead, as we've discussed, those northern counties near Washington, D.C., especially Fairfax. That vote is coming in. Hillary Clinton is pulling ahead.
Back to what you were saying with the media, I completely agree that they've done a terrible job on addressing real issues right from the first debate.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of, we buy into it, though, which is part of the problem, right? I mean, now news is all, like, media news for profit and everything, and I think it's, for a lot of people, it's probably a little bit more interesting to hear about Trump's latest scandal, or to talk about what Hillary may or may not have written in an email.
They're making it like a tabloid and throwing that stuff out there that doesn't matter. And it's not what Trump says about somebody, getting off a bus back in the day is not what's going to create jobs. It's not going to help you or me with student loans.
I mean, but who put us in the position of putting that out there?
The last 50 years.
If you look at, you know, Hillary and what she could run on. She couldn't really run on much. She couldn't run on her record. So all she did was try to destroy Trump in the media. And she had the media in her back pocket. The media has been in her back pocket from day one. Trump was able to talk about the issues.
Exactly what we were talking about, because we were talking about how the media doesn't focus on important issues. And then as you use that to segue into Hillary's emails and how she has the media in her.
Because that's what Hillary wanted them to do.
No, I don't. No, this is a systemic problem with our media, and it goes beyond this election. It's hard to be a journalist and not have an opinion about your next president, especially when someone like Trump does the things that he does. I mean, you know, if you don't,
journalists,
it's fine that you guys don't see a raging narcissist. That's okay, but like a lot of people do.
And I don't think the rest of the country agrees on this at all, that we should have a two-party system. And I think that's going to change in the future.
I mean, you know, I don't know if we would want something like 40 candidates or something on a ballot, but it would be pretty great if, you know, it was feasible to have 4 or 5 presidential candidates, and you could actually rank your voting so that, you know, we're not locked into this ridiculous two-party system where you're right. We're talking a lot of times about the lesser of two evils. Certainly in this election, I get the feeling that it's really about the lesser of two evils, you know.
Well, I mean, it's a problem when somebody doesn't get to choose a candidate that they're interested in. They're voting because we, quote unquote, have these parties we have to vote for. I mean, I wish we could take actually Democrat, Republican, Independent out and just put people. We talk about racism, sexism, all this stuff. It was a big part of this election. And why don't we just say, here are 10 human beings that are voting for president. Why don't you pick who you like best? Or whatever that number is.
Maybe Vice President breaking the tie. And incidentally, another state, I mean, Pennsylvania, I mean, which Mrs. Secretary Clinton's ahead in, I mean, again, just eyeballing it, most of the vote looks to me like it's Republican vote that's outstanding. That blue wall, that everyone Democratic blue wall, which was Pennsylvania, Michigan.
There has been quite a shift here in the last hour or so, George.
Okay, Robin Roberts, we are not ready to project this table.
3 for Clinton. The night is still early. The map barely filled in.
Let me tell you this, it is not good for all Republicans on the top, but a very good day for Republicans in the Senate and also the House, because it looks like we are projecting that they will lose no more than 9 and possibly as few as 5 seats in the House. That's far less than they thought they were going to lose.
Let's dig into Wisconsin a little bit more. What are you seeing out of Madison County in Wisconsin?
Let's take a look. Madison, we see 71% of the votes in. Obviously, huge Clinton vote there.
A source saying that Clinton has called Trump to concede the election.
And I've talked to somebody at the Clinton campaign. They have confirmed that piece of.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry to keep you waiting. Complicated business. Complicated.
I just feel the biggest sense of relief that Donald Trump is going to be our next president. I can't wait to see what he's going to do for this country, and I know that there's so many people that are nervous and afraid of what is going to come with him as a president, but I am telling you, if everyone's taxes are lower, it's better for everyone. If everyone's health care is lower, it's better for everyone. If everyone has jobs, it's better for everyone. You can't lose with him.
I honestly can't believe that this is the situation that we find ourselves in. You know, what I was hoping for was a landslide that would send a message to the Republican Party that you can't put a candidate like Trump on the national stage and expect anything less than embarrassment. So I honestly, I haven't mentally prepared to even think about the reality that this might happen. So yeah, apparently a candidate like Trump can win the presidency of the United States of America, and it's terrifying. I think most Americans that really think about the political process and what this country means, what we stand for, what it takes to be the leader of our country. I think most of them are, I hope most of them are probably terrified.
Am I worried about the next 4 years? Absolutely. I'm terrified. You know, I would hope that any candidate that would win the presidency would take it very seriously and would think about the legacy that they leave behind. Donald Trump strikes me as someone who is so ego-driven and really a slave to his own insecurity, that I'm not confident at all that he will lead this country in the right direction.
Last night, I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him on behalf of our country. I hope that he will be a successful president for all Americans.
At the end, after 18 months of campaigning and spending over $2 billion, only an estimated 58% of eligible voters voted in the 2016 presidential election. More than 95 million people did not vote. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes more than Donald Trump, but she lost the Electoral College by less than 1% in states such as Wisconsin and Michigan. And in Pennsylvania, just over 68,000 voters turned the state Republican after almost 28 years of voting Democrat. On December 19th, 2016, the Electoral College officially voted for Donald Trump as the 45th President of the United States.
Following these election results.
22 News reporter Ashley Afonso is live in the newsroom with a look at where those protests are happening.
Yeah, things are a little quieter now, but just shortly after Donald Trump claimed victory in New York City, protests started across the country, happening on both the East and West Coasts. I want you to take a look at this video right now. I've been telling you about protests in Portland, Oregon all morning. Here is a look at protests there. This was just after 3 o'clock Eastern time, so around midnight there. They took to the streets. One activist said, quote, "We are making noise. We are telling Donald Trump that we don't like that he's here. I feel like we're doomed. This can't be real," end quote. These protesters were also seen burning the American flag there. And take a look at this video. This is from California, where hundreds took to the streets there in San Francisco. They set fires on the roadways. Demonstrators were also reported in Berkeley and Oakland, where students chanted, "Not my president."